Hello, everyone. GM, just wanted to thank everyone for tuning in. You are joining Fans, Sports, and Web3 Changing the Game. There's a question mark at the end of that title, and we hope to try and answer it. Are we in fact changing the game? So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce a few of my close friends. I would call you friends at this stage. We've advanced to that point, whether you like it or not. I will have each of these folks intro you, but they are innovating at the intersection of sports and decentralized technology, and I actually mean that. We're actually building things, and it's nice to get a chance to talk about them with people that have real conviction. So why don't we kick it off? Nikhil, why don't I start with you, sir? Please tell everyone that's joined us what is going on and a little bit about your background, if you will.
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Nikhil. I work at a company called One Championship, which is one of Asia's largest global sports media properties. And the sport that we're based around is mixed martial arts. Essentially, my role at One is I help turn fans into players, sports into communities, and turn ideas into interactive experiences. Just to kind of put a TLDR, I make fandom more fun. That's a quick intro about me.
Cool. Mark?
Hi everyone, my name is Mark Epps. I'm the Director of Comms and Web3 at the ATP Tour. The ATP Tour is men's tennis. We run a tour of nearly 60 events every year, the top men's players in the world. 3 and a bit years ago now, I reached out to the team and said, I think there's an opportunity for us to explore in blockchain and solve some of the most critical problems that we face as a business. It's been a really fun 3.5 years since we've launched a few projects. We've learned a lot, and we're very, very bullish on this technology. We see huge upside in its potential to engage fans, which we'll talk all about today.
Tarek.
Hi, everybody. My name's Tarek Nazlawi. I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Trace. What Trace exists to do is really to make unseen fandom seen, right? So if Nikhil's job is to make fandom more fun, our job is to also make it more visible. And we can talk a lot about the reasons why we think that's a massive opportunity for the fan experience, but also, of course, commercially in the industry. But it all comes from a place of being able to celebrate the obsessions that we have around the things that we love and make that known and make that marked. So that's what Trace is about, and that comes from a bunch of experience leading digital innovation at Adidas before this, and really understanding the intersection of culture, technology, and commerce.
For those of you that don't know me, that's fairly easy, actually, because I have a walrus logo for a headshot and a non-X account. So my name is Roberto Beltramini. I'm with Mission Labs, and I run investments and partnerships on the enterprise side. So very excited to talk about this. I think the easiest way to start is to just ask, and I would direct this at Nikhil and Mark first, obviously, but what is actually bringing sports properties on chain? Like very, very simply, and maybe I'll start with Mark there. Like what you described the fact that you were kind of the internal advocate for this initially, right? Like the idea quite literally started with you. You went to advocate for it. Like what? Because we all know that decentralization for decentralization's sake is not exactly like a pitch for an enterprise, right? So what made you decide to advocate for this, and what did you see? Like, what was the problem we were trying to solve?
Yeah, I mean, I'll hold my hands up and say that when this journey started back in 2022, quite a lot of it was hype driven. You know, this was around the time of Top Shots, when all eyes in sport were on this technology. And our view of what this technology can be has massively evolved in the time since. The problem that we are trying to solve is that as a sport, we don't know who our fans are. And I'm not just saying that flippantly, that's the reality. We, as a sport, tennis, we have 1 billion fans around the world. We do a really good job of the fans who come physically to our events. That's about 5 million every year. But for the remaining 99.5% who consume our sport remotely, we know very little about them. And that's a threat to our entire business model. It's a threat to our ability to sell media rights or to sell sponsorships to the brands who ultimately want to know and reach a consumer. This technology provides us an opportunity to create a new medium of engagement, which is a very, very broad term. We can talk a little bit about the work that we've done with Trace in the last 12 months, which I think is is indicative of the opportunity that we see. But to put it very pithily, there is a huge audience who sit at home watching our sport from the other side of the screen, for whom engagement with the sport is very one directional. And this technology allows us to make that a little bit more two-way. It's opening huge doors for fan acquisition, fan engagement, and we believe it's going to open new doors for commercialization too. Partners are hungry for data. They want to know consumers. And that's why we think this is such an interesting tech stack. As I said, our view on what this tech can be for us has evolved massively and will continue to do so. But I'll stop talking there. I'd love to hear what Nikhil's view is on this.
Yeah, I think, Mark, you pretty much nailed it in terms of, what even I was going to say, right? So today the fan experience is very disjoint, right? You can engage on social, which is a very one way. You're passively consuming, then you're commenting. Digital platforms, OTT platforms where you kind of tune in stadium experiences, merchandise, and so on. These tend to be very engaging experiences, but they are very siloed, right? And they aren't as necessarily interactive unless you're going to the stadium per se, right? I think blockchain allows us to build, I would say, a much more meaningful relationship with fans, and it also allows us to really foster communities that's there, right? If we go around building a universal fan identity, right, it solves a problem that you mentioned out, right, in terms of, hey, you have these pockets of data about how fans are engaging with your league, but if you build a single fan identity, you can really understand how they are consuming your content, putting, kind of just engaging with you. And it's also mutually beneficial, right? Beyond you just gaining great insights on fans, which you can kind of use in terms of creating products, it also really allows you to empower fans with real utility, right? And giving them a sense of belonging. I think blockchain tends to be a great vehicle to kind of take that empowerment that a league has and give that to fans. That is what I believe will really take fandom to another level.
I'm going to interject, if I may. I'm nodding furiously because a lot of what you just said there really hits home to me about the siloed fan experience. Sport, I would say, has been a little bit lazy in trying to fix some of those problems, because historically, sport has been doing really, really well. Something that I think has accelerated, the investment in stuff like what we're talking about is the competition that's coming from outside. And I think, you look sideways and you look at the Netflixes of the world, or you look at the gaming companies of the world, or you look at Spotify, or all the myriad other ways that a consumer can choose to spend their attention. And I think it's becoming more evident now than it has ever been for sports rights holders that is a problem that you need to fix. You need to make seamless user experiences that are a joy to use, that are not disjointed and confusing. So, amen. I'm in that camp with you.
Tarek, so one of the benefits that we've had in terms of working with both Mark and Nikhil is that in both cases, they were already building, right? They had already made a decision to build and use decentralized technology before we started to work with them. So a lot of times, if you're in my position, right, finding teams that have conviction and have internal buy-in and momentum to do that is actually quite challenging. And frankly, many of them are doing it for different reasons, right? They're not actually trying to solve a problem, frankly. They're just following a licensing model and trying to bring in sponsorship dollars. So, but these two gents, for you, Tarek, are like a dream, right? You walk into a meeting, you want to kind of pitch your value proposition. They already understand it. They have an intent behind it, right? They've been working on advocating for it internally. That's not what you run into always, right? So what from your view, what do you think is bringing sports properties on chain?
I think a combination of curiosity and empowerment is usually the recipe that I see, right? So if having sort of sat in the seat of doing corporate innovation at a large brand before, you kind of start to get a feel for like what is an environment which is conducive to experimenting with new stuff, right? And there needs to be this special combination of, we as an organization do want to understand. We're like first seek first to understand. And if there is that combination of curiosity with trusted and empowered individuals to actually take some risks and experiment on that journey, then the organization can genuinely learn, not just by listening, but by doing. And those are the minority. It's the same across any topic when it comes to any kind of corporate innovation. Is that most of the time the business and all the humans in it are aligned around exploiting the core business model. That's literally, in fact, it's irresponsible to do anything else than exploit your core business model. But when there is that apparatus of exploration as well, that's what we look for. So, for example, sometimes people ask me, do you have a strategy around sporting verticals about where you think Trace should exist? And we can probably get into what we actually do in a minute. And my answer is that I've got things we would love to do, but really the criteria for actually demonstrating the value of using this emerging technology and acquiring, engaging, and monetizing fans is the right team and the right person really on the other side of the desk, right? And is there the right level of empowerment and curiosity? And that is relatively scarce, but you know it when you see it. And we're very privileged to be able to partner with people like Mark and be on in forums like this with you guys and you, Nikhil, as well. It takes guts to do corporate innovation, not just from the individual, but from the people who are in charge of it. So it's a real credit to both the organizations, for One and for ATP.
Do you think there's, and I guess this is back to Mark and Nikhil, do you find that there's different rationale at different levels within the organization, right? Like I know I was very conscious of this, Nikhil, when we were just in Singapore, seeing Adney and Huafeng speak about this, right? Like it's very present of mind to me that none of this would work without Huafeng and Chatri believing in it and putting fans first and kind of wanting and frankly you just being a digital first sports property. I think. Do you find that the rationale is different, like for different types of stakeholders? Like, do you have to change how you approach that to get buy-in? I'd love to hear you kind of opine on that.
Sure. So I would say it is relatively a bit more easier for us than compared to, I would say, some other sports league. We've only been around for the last 14 years. So we were born in the digital era, right? We haven't been around for the last 50, 60 years. So the internet or digital isn't new to us, right? It's what our strongest point is, right? For One Championship, we do roughly around 2.5-3 billion organic video views on a monthly basis. That's there, right? So digital is our place where we kind of succeed the most. But I do believe that blockchain brings a few unique aspects to it that is new even for us, right? The whole part about empowering fans and trusting fans, right? It is something new. You're being a bit more open about how you operate.
Did Nikhil just freeze for a second?
He did.
Wow. Let's give him a quick second. But in the meantime, Mark, if you want to give a shout out, because I'm always very appreciative of the sports executives that are open and minded. And I know that you had a few folks internally at the senior most level that were particularly helpful to you. If you ever want to give a shout out to someone here that made this possible, I'll scream it from the rooftops.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm the sort of the forward face for all things Web3 at the ATP, but it's only because of the support and the trust that I have from the team that I can do what I do. I always remember when I think it was our second project we launched, totally flopped. And our CEO came up to me. It was during our finals event. It was a couple of years back. And he looked at me, he's like, Mark, what's wrong with you? You look down. And I told him, I'm like, look, we spent 6 months building a project. It was all around, co-created art on chain. It's not doing very well. And he literally looked at me, he's like, don't worry, just keep going. And that's really rare in sports. It's really rare for legacy sports to be willing to take risks like that and willing to accept failure. It's not a natural behavior for our org. To your point about whether the message changes at different levels of the org, I actually don't think so. I think the reason that our collaboration with Trace has seen such universal buy-in across the company is that the goal it is trying to achieve is, one, extremely simple to understand, and two, critical to everybody being able to do their job. If we do not know our fans and we can't engage them, that affects digital, it affects social, it affects marketing, it affects commercial. So, I actually think that the message being simple and consistent is a really important factor for getting buy-in. And having that, I don't want to make it seem like what we do is kind of hard to refute, but it gives you a lot of latitude to go out and innovate because you're trying something that everybody wants you to succeed at. That's been my experience. Nikhil, you're back.
We're back.
Yes, sorry guys. Okay, I did not know where I dropped off. Can
Right at the
anyone
beginning,
share?
you launched in. You did. It was like the age-old crypto meme where you lean in, you leaned in, and then we launched in.
I think there's a lot of passion over there, and I might have just kicked off the broad, the LAN cable or something that's there. But I can address the question that's there, right? So even though we are a young sports property, right, been around for the last 14 years, social and digital is pretty much the meat of what we do. Blockchain does bring along a new aspect about trust and about empowerment, right, which is a bit new for us. But one thing, both our co-founders, right, Chatri as well as Swafang, have been pretty clear on is that we need to be on the forefront of innovation. The reason we got to where we are is because we focused on social and we focused on digital at a time where not everyone was. Everyone was focusing a bit more towards linear. So I think, being on the cusp of innovation, being a bit more cutting edge, being a bit experimentative, and going with the mindset that, hey, this can work out or it might not, right? But what we cannot do is not innovate. I think that mindset is already there. And when you have that in place, it's a bit more easier to operate and to move ahead.
So like I almost feel like we practiced this, which we did not, but that tees this up perfectly, right? So we let's say we have a general understanding or an agreement, I think, in terms of like the significant kind of problem that we're trying to solve, and what interests sports properties in trying to solve it. What's like the actual? I think the thing that we're all trying to still figure out is what is the actual thing that brings the fan on chain, right? Like what is the experience that is enabled or even made better by a blockchain that like brings that activity onto the chain itself. And so there, by the way, if you are commenting in the chats, there is a series of questions available. We are going to read these. And one person, I'm going to do a terrible job of pronouncing this gentleman's name, but came up with 3 bangers right here. So we are paying attention. We'll incorporate them into the conversation. But the idea here is like, what is bringing fans on chain? In Nikhil's case, we've had 5 different POCs that we're working on, right? I think Tarek, Trace, and Mark has obviously had several. Tarek is a little bit more focused specifically, I think, but has started to iterate across a few different tournaments. So yeah, I just want to open that up. Let's start maybe with Tarek there. Like, what is the thing that you think, the experience that you think is compelling and ultimately brings folks on chain?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, look, I think if you know what the problem is, you still got to figure out what the right solution is, right? In short order. So if the problem is that really most fandom is happening elsewhere, there's no trace of it. There is very much a pun intended on that side of it, which leaves organizations like Mark's and Nikhil's not knowing who the fans are. You just flip over the coin and you see the opportunity, right? Which is that actually the way that consumption of sport is already evolving gives an opportunity, right? There's Gen Z don't really want to go to sporting events anymore. They consume a lot more content, 4 times more content than the prior generation, but half of Gen Z's never been to one. But 75% say that being part of sport culture is just as much fun as actually watching the sport itself. So there it is. Being a fan is the game. That actually is the game. And so you got to package an experience in a way which is playable. Every single brand, by the way, is going through this, right? We talked at Adidas about how to make the brand playable. It's not just a commerce experience. It's not just a consumption of the content experience. It has to be something I can actively participate in, right? So we sort of narrow the aperture down to playability. And then within that, we've picked a formula, right? And our formula is pretty simple, which is how do you capture obsession in real time and then store it, right? Like at the end of the day, sport is the reason it's such a big business and growing is because it's basically like the only unscripted drama left on earth, right? Even politics seems like scripted entertainment now, right? It's the only thing where there's like a level playing field, and the sort of the appointment to view nature of people all over the world experiencing this at the same time is live. That's how I participate in culture now, right? Now, how do we in real time capture that? And our solution is, well, all of those fans who obviously give a shit about this thing, right? I don't know if we're live, so I'll just say care deeply.
You're good, sir. You're good.
Okay, that care deeply enough to be here at this moment, no matter what the time zone is, no matter where they are in the world, right, or what they have to do to even watch it. We are going to give that fan an artifact, which is a recognition of you're here for it, we're here for it, we're globally, we're a community that's here for it together. And the way that we try and actually package that is to say, well, what is happening in culture? Who's here for it? What's going on court or on court or on track or on field? What is the conversation around this? And fuse that onto almost like a virtual ticket stub. You don't have to pay for it. If you're here for it, you're here for it. We give it to you. So we use a bunch of techniques, automated, generative, and manual, to sort of put that stuff together and say, here's something that you can keep, which is a record that you're here for it. And we gamify that, right? Make a prediction, bring a bunch of other fans in, collect a streak and upgrade your collectible. This is where the medium of the digital assets really has a role to play. Because at the end of the day, how do you kind of capture that obsession in real time and find a way to store it, except by using something which is provably scarce and can be made dynamic and critically can be turned into a signal which belongs to an identity, right? Because, what the guys were saying at the beginning is, we don't know who our fans are, or we want, as Nikhil was saying, we want to understand more about the sort of the holistic behavior between silos of the fan. So to sort of steal from the, solve intelligence, solve everything kind of language, solve identity and solve for everything. The trick is, how do you make it inviting to actually express and collect this identity together? And that's why we think sort of using the capture culture in real time, the storytelling of that, is a fascinating mode to do that. You can see in the background here some examples of the stuff that we've done there. I think Mark's got one right there in his background too. Capture the story of what's going on in a way which true fans really understand and dig. And that's what creates the desire to get that opt-in. But you got to give something before you're going to get something. That's our way of thinking about it. And a digital asset which tells that story is a gift that we can afford to give. So let's do it.
I tend to steal liberally from Tarek's storytelling because he's so good at it, and I borrow a lot of catchphrases from you. But just to double click on that for a second, I think tonally what Trace does is very, very different. Coming back to the point about the gift you can afford to give, the giving of something to a fan is subtly but very importantly different from a tonal perspective to a lot of what you see in the digital activation space, which is very transactional, sometimes extractive. It feels very different. And I think our fans have recognized the distinction between those two things in engaging with Trace so far. And to just bridge what you were talking about with what Nikhil mentioned at the top of the session, the thing that most excites me about this tech and the thing that this uniquely unlocks, I believe, is what we internally refer to as the magic trick. We think oftentimes sort of 18, 24 months down the line of what could these credentials, these on-chain credentials do for a fan in other contexts, with other brands, on other digital domains, with other tennis tournaments, other sporting properties. There are obviously ways to connect brands in the Web2 world, but practically speaking, for companies that maybe aren't prepared to share data, or, for whom maybe integration is not practical, blockchain provides you a really interesting alternative route where the asset is in the hands of the fans. And whether you show up at Emirates.com and get upgraded because guess what, you're a proven ATP Tour fan, or you show up at Lacoste.com and can buy a different polo because you've supported Novak Djokovic. These are the kind of experiences that we believe are uniquely enabled by blockchain. And it's the reason why we are so excited to work with Trace and to be working in this space. Nikhil, I get the sense that you're itching to riff on that. So
before he even goes there, though, there's a question in the chat specifically that says, how can we go about using gaming to promote Web3? It was directed at you, Mark, but I think given what Nikhil's been building for the last 2 years, I want to throw that question to Nikhil. I hope you don't mind me redirecting. I'm going to say your name is Ahebwa Michael, but I probably butchered that. Apologies. There's two other parts to his question that we will get into. But Nikhil, talk to us a little bit about gaming.
Sure. So we've been building a game with Animoca brands for the last 2 years, right? It's a mobile game. It's a mix of, I would say, strategy as well as patch three. It's an interesting formula that we've kind of gone with, right? We've gone with a bit more narrower from a total addressable market perspective, but focus a bit more on going deeper. So hey, focusing a bit more towards mid to long term retention and not as much day one retention. Sorry if I'm going a bit technical. That's there, but one of the to answer the question, right, in terms of gaming and blockchain, I think if you're building a game for a wider addressable market that's there, for me, in terms of for our sports league, we know that majority of our audiences today are not on blockchain. I think one of the most foundational things that you can think of is making sure that you're not scaring someone off with, hey, sign a transaction, open a wallet, here's a seed phrase, right? It has to be, I would say, onboarded in the user journey at the correct time. Let them get into the game, let them play, let them enjoy, right? And you show the value of, hey, for our games, we have a closed loop token called adrenaline that is there, which is, think of it like a loyalty point. So when you engage with any one of our products, whether it's the game, whether it's our comic book series, whether it's our prediction products, you get this loyalty point, and the game will tell you, hey, if you got this loyalty point, you can use it and participate in these other games that exist on a website. You can engage with the community, you can get tickets, you can get VIP experiences, you can get things money can't buy, right? So I would say it's about onboarding the users in the correct way. Don't scare them off, hey, do this, or sign up for this wallet. Credit to Sui that the tech stack isn't very scary, whether you use ZK login, whether you use Inoki, whether you use Slush, right? It's very friendly from a web to user perspective, which is crucial for us. But I think the first thing that you need to think of is, don't scare off audiences with Web3 per se on the gaming front, unless you're aiming for Web3 specific audiences. That's the first thing you keep in mind. Second thing I would talk a bit about is, how do you make sure you build an economy that is conducive to different, I would say, player sets that are actually engaging with the game, right? It's not just extractive, like in terms of, hey, you can only play this game to earn money. The game has to be fun first. It has to have a really strong economy that encourages everyone to kind of participate, engage, and go a bit more deeper, and then the whole value creation comes, that's there. So I would say, first thing, definitely make sure you don't scare off users by very strong Web3 terminologies, and to just make a fun game, engage them deeper, and then talk a bit about, hey, this is the unique things that Web3 brings to you. I'm not sure I answered the question directly, but I do hope that it's partially answered.
No. I think you did, and I think it's really interesting to me, right? Because I think that we're obviously experimenting, and the thing I appreciate about this group more than anything is like the intellectual honesty. Like, we are willing to iterate and change and try different things, but when they don't work, we're honest with each other about it, and we test our assumptions. And so, like, obviously within the partnership with One Championship, we've acknowledged that people like to try and predict the outcomes of matches and events and fights, right? We've attempted to provide them with more lore and information about the individual fighters and athletes, I should say, and their trajectory and how they came to be where they are. There is obviously at the very core of it the desire to just engage with the content, right? And the content and the like actual footage of the matches themselves. I wonder, to me, like, it would be super helpful. There's two things, right? You're not going to find an experience that fits that entire. These are actual organizations that scale, right? Tennis has 1 billion fans, like with a B. That you're not going to find 1 billion people that all like the same thing, except for the fact that in this particular thing, the only thing they probably have in common is that they all love tennis, right? All of, like, one championship is the fastest growing sports property in the world by like most measures, and I think it was the fastest to 100 million. Again, like, they're going to have different disparate interests, right? So you're going to have to try and figure out like what matters. But I think the interesting thing, and this is for the folks that are focused on Web3 out here, and I think this applies to other sectors, is there's no bigger red flag than when you speak to a sports property and they're not concerned about the tech, right? Because that is an indication, that is your first sign that they don't plan on building anything that actually is going to work. Because if they're not worried, if you have 1 billion fans and you're not worried about what happens from a throughput perspective when you come up with an engaging experience, like, you've told me everything I need to know, right? So I guess the where that takes me, and Nikhil, you've just mentioned kind of ZK login and Inoki. Can you speak a little bit to what part of the tech stack, or what the tech stack, the Sui stack specifically, has enabled, or what you found to be critical when evaluating the process and trying to figure out like why you wanted to build here? And Tarek, obviously, that is something I would very much like you to address as well.
Yeah. So I would say, to put it in a simple way, we looked for the 4 S's, right? First of thing I already called out is simplicity. It cannot be something that is scary. The first S is simplicity. The second one is security. Third one is speed, and the fourth one is scalability. These are the 4 things from a technical perspective that we looked at in terms of, hey, if we work with a blockchain partner, do they kind of make sure on these 4 fronts there is no compromise, right? Like, you don't want to exactly serve up, like, for example, a prediction product or a game with a user, right? And they click buy, and then they have a 7-second loading bar waiting for the NFT to be minted, and then they actually get it, right? So that's the user expectation is everything has to be instant, right? So I think those 4 S's, and I'll just recall them out again: simplicity, security, speed, and scalability were the important technical factors. But I would also say, from a software perspective, it's about the mindset to co-create, right? It's about, hey, we're going to go on this journey together. We're going to do some things. Some of it might not work out. Some of it will work out. And we're just going to go deeper in the areas where it works out. That's there, right? So I think the co-creation mindset, along with making sure those 4 S's are kind of, checked in place, were the important factors that, we're like, hey, it makes sense to build on Sui, because, all of these are ticks for us. I think that's a simple answer. In not going too technical, obviously, I did call out earlier that ZK logging, Inoki, Slash are great examples. Like, for example, one of the things that we did is, for our fans, the way they engage with any one of our products is something known as One Passport. It's an identity system that's built on Microsoft Azure. So essentially what we did is we married One Passport with ZK login. So whenever someone onboards to any one of our products, you have a single identity and a single wallet that's there, right? That way, for a user, it's very seamless, and we could work with something like a ZK login in a very easy way. And it's something we did pretty early on in our journey, in the first 1 or 2 months, and that is what we have across all our products. So I think you can see it, the proof in the pudding. But yeah, if I did, I hope the words also carried that meaning across that's there. And I'm sure Mark and Tariq would kind of agree with me in terms of they've also been building for more than a year. I'm sure that they also agree on the same.
I certainly do. And before I let Tarek continue on the technical side of things, I'll just offer a separate point, which is about reputation. And when we were launching with Trace in November last year, we were working with some outside lawyers who were helping us figure out all the blockchain stuff. And they asked us, so what chain are you launching on? We said, oh, we're launching on Sui. And they went away, and 48 hours later, they came back and they said, good choice. We've done our due diligence. Good choice. So that was I tell it in a funny way, but it's obviously important.
And then they talked about how much Sui they'd bought and what their bags are doing, and
they do actually email me every now and again to thank me.
Yeah. So look, I don't want to repeat too much, but we did the same thing as Nikhil, right? ZK login and the Trace identity system are intrinsically linked, and that was like step 0 for us, really. I'd say that I would be lying if I said that I saw the whole picture from the very beginning about which parts of the Sui stack are going to end up being game changers, right? At the time that we were figuring out where to build Trace, it was actually quite difficult to make a distinction about, one chain and another chain until you really get to know the humans on the team. And yeah, we had the same. I had three S's. I think the fourth one, Nikhil, I'm definitely making a note of here. So yeah, it needs to be cheap enough. It needs to be scalable enough. It needs to be fast enough to handle millions and millions of fans. That was table stakes. But it was when we first got in contact, Roberto, after we'd done the first proof of concept in Formula One, and we started actually explicitly collaborating and this actually goes to answer one of the questions that was in the thing, like how does Sui support the developers in the ecosystem? Where there was a specific use case that we were looking at for a sports property, and when we started getting into the ideation stuff around where do we want to take the product, we already found that like the use cases that we have in mind, there are already modules for us to do, and there was excitement and energy about like actually building that together. And that is, if you are a young company, that's like a warm hug. Okay, like you don't get that everywhere. So that was number one. But the thing actually that like the most recent penny drops for me have been about why I'm so convinced we made the right choice there is not just because of the basic blockchain element of it, it's because of the full stack, right? Like the penny only dropped really for me at a base camp in Dubai, where you start to understand how Sui is a coordinating layer across Walrus for the decentralized storage side of things. And then even more, in my view, at least, more importantly, the combination of this decentralized storage with Seal and with Nautilus. Why? Right? If you don't know what those things are, please do go have a look at them. But if you are an enterprise, if you have intellectual property, if you actually have like company intelligence as well, which you don't necessarily want to be sitting on a public ledger for everybody to see, you need to be able to figure out how to mix decentralization with business reality. And if you're going to do that, you need to be able to turn the dial on what kind of information should be aggregated and public and what information should be private and who should have access to what. That is an absolute game changer when it comes to adoption by enterprise. I didn't know that when we decided to build on Sui, but like I'm not surprised that within 12 months of that decision that we're listening to Adeni and team talk about that in Abu Dhabi, and that's a big sigh of relief for me, because back at Adidas, that was one of the big unanswered questions: is how we're going to also protect sensitive information, how we're going to have easy readability between us and our partners without having to worry about like whether this information is going to be, you know, publicly visible or, you know, vampire attacks and blah blah, things that are very difficult for many other people in business to understand. So I'm even more excited about what's to come than what we've got, quite frankly. That's my take on it.
Super helpful.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Nikhil, did you want to kind of touch on a few of the? I'd love to talk about Fight Library very briefly, right? Just because I think that's such an interesting problem set, and I think it's one that speaks to a lot of different orgs, right? Is that you've built up this fan base. They engage with you across all of these different platforms, but you don't really have like a central repository for it or a place where fans can engage with that content. Right. So like, can you speak a little bit to, because that was one of the things that I'm super thankful for is when we started having a conversation about what we might build together, you were very thoughtful about like actual business challenges that you were hoping to solve and how the tech might be able to do that. So if you could speak a little bit to that, I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah. So let me just talk about the first problem statement and then a bit about Fight Library, right? So today for us, we do more than 1,000 pieces of video content on a monthly basis that's there, right? Because we focus a lot on different platforms, short form, medium form, long form content, and also localized, right? So we have separate social media channels for Japan, for Thailand. In this part of the world, language tends to be, I would say, quite distinguished. That's there, right? So we definitely have a lot of content. Now today, for a fan, right? If I want to watch Rocktang versus a Demetrius Johnson, in a 9:16 with no commentary in a 5-minute format, how do you find something like that on YouTube or Facebook or any social media platform that's there, right? Or OTT platform, right? And that's essentially how the thesis of Fight Library came out to be. Hey, you choose what is the form of content you want. Do you want commentary? Do you want it to be 20 minutes? Do you want it to be highlights? Which are the athletes you want to see? And we would kind of look at all of these things that you put together and spit it out. Obviously, here I'm saying where it's very detailed about exactly what you want, but obviously there would be AI kind of having an algorithm in terms of taking on consumption patterns and showing relevant content to the user. But essentially, Fight Library solves that problem for us. YouTube, Facebook, etc. are not the right platforms to kind of find content beyond just the first few keywords, where yes, it will throw out the one where it's the most popular, but beyond that, you can't, right? And not everyone wants to watch the same piece of content, right, in the same format. I think that is essentially what Fight Library solves for us. In the 2000, 3000 plus fights that have been in the history of one championship, it's about the format that you want to see it in, the language you want to see it in, and in the medium that you want to watch it in, right? That's what Fight Library kind of serves. And yes, talking a bit about how we kind of serve that. So I think we are tinkering a bit with Walrus that's there. We also leveraged Walrus when we were building out a comic book series. And we're also looking at how we can potentially leverage Walrus to kind of host this Fight Library where all the content kind of exists.
That's really helpful. Somebody asked the question earlier, and I'm just always very mindful of this because I think that something we're particularly conscious of as an organization is that at its core, like, this is a developer platform, right? And if we ever lose track of that, we've lost the plot. So I think it's something that, like, internally, Sam, Kostas, everyone, but Sam, Kostas, George, right, Adney, Evan, they're very, very, very direct about that. And so there was a question earlier, like, obviously it's lovely to talk about the individual aspects of the tech, but there was a question earlier that I thought was interesting, which was, what do we look for to invest in, right? Like, what do you look for in terms of companies? And I think they're like, this is going to be no surprise, but it starts with the founder. Tarek and Trace are one of the first investments I made, or at least that I led when joining. And I think that it's been a journey since, right? I feel like we've known each other for a really long time, but I think it's like, this is maybe an oversimplification, but it's like true conviction. I think is one of the most critically important things. Without that, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter how good your idea is. I think the next thing that I would point to, again, is intellectual honesty, like being able to be honest with yourself about your own assumptions and how to tackle challenges and what's working and what isn't, right? Without that, partnering with anyone is very challenging. And then I think another thing that is often undervalued or not valued properly in this space. Obviously, the technical components are having technical capacity is an absolute requirement, but having subject matter expertise in the area that you are trying to solve a problem is, like, so critically important, right? So Tarek's background, doing what he does, that's a very hard thing to find. To find somebody that understands the tech, but then also knows how to speak to a sports executive is, I mean, it is a tiny, tiny little group. We're in a group chat on WhatsApp, and there are not enough folks in there. Like, that's all I can tell you. But so, yeah, Tarek, if you can you speak a little bit to kind of what your experience has been, and some of the things, because we've spoken a bit about the POCs so far. Like, what's going on right now with Trace? What are you doing in terms of, like, current engagements? Give people the opportunity to engage in it, because I know that Shanghai is in the quarterfinals right now, and we have Turin coming up. So can you speak to that a little bit? Yeah, absolutely. And then I've got an intellectual honesty question for you guys too, if there's time. Okay. I don't know if there's time, but so I mentioned a little bit before about making every moment sort of a collectible thing that you can have, that we give you. And so with Mark and the ATP, we've been experimenting with that since Turin last year, which is the big sort of finale in the ATP calendar, is the ATP finals in November, which are coming up again in a few weeks' time. At that event, we basically turned match data, momentum swing data, between one player and another player into digital art for every single match, right? So it's like, if you're here for this match, you come to the platform, you collect this artifact saying, I was here for it. And they're pretty dope. They look nice. They're cool things to have and to collect, and you see the family together, and it's like a thing. And the whole intent of that was, does anybody do it, right? Like, when you're starting something out, like, you have to think of your entire company as an experiment. Do people come and get this stuff? The results from that were really, really strong. So in 8 days, I think we had 75,000 people. I know we had 75,000 people come, collect nearly 800,000 matches. The retention rate was super, super strong. And it was a fantastic springboard for Mark, myself, and his colleagues to start thinking ahead about what we wanted to do more of.
And so we have been, we did 2 tournaments this summer. Shanghai is live right now. And I mean, the big thing that we're doing here is like, we're actually co-creating what that experience should look like with fans as well, right? So the idea of, here's one example. There are, Mark knows, there's a dozen things that we've learned along the way, right? But the first thing that we asked after the last tournaments was, okay, well, how was it? Like, what did you experience? What was clear? What wasn't clear? When we communicated this and you landed here, classic UX stuff. So one example is that actually, collecting an event is something which is kind of a new idea, but like rooting for a player is something that I do. Like, as a tennis fan, I'm checking the scores, I'm seeing what's going on, and I probably have got an allegiance one way or another. So we're just choosing to frame that core fan interaction around, well, who are you backing, right? And then, we actually generate the collectibles using the information of who everybody's backing as well in the experience. So you can go click that link now as well in the chat there and go try it for yourself. Of course, we'd love to hear your feedback. We're doing surveys after every single event as well to see how people are responding to that. That is actually, I think, one of the things which, working with a company like us, with a community who's tech forward, can bring to rights holders like Mark is, like, there's actually people that we are talking to every single day about what they want from your sport. Now, Nikhil grew up in that environment, right? His company grew up in that environment. Not everybody did. So, being able to figure out, like, how do you unlock that extra level of advocacy for the governing body in this ecosystem is something which is like, it's right here at our fingertips now that we actually have that kind of direct engagement. So it's an always on learning thing. I just wish there was tennis on every day. That would be we could keep the velocity that high.
We're running out of
Tarek and his team a lot of credit. I know we only have a couple of minutes, but like, we've done a huge amount of work between the events earlier in the summer and Shanghai to effectively change the core mechanic of the product. But the root of that change has been a willingness to set ego aside and to question every assumption we made. And as Tarek said, to speak to the fans. That for us has been totally new. Like, we don't have those forums as a brand for getting live consumer feedback on products. That's not how we've built products in the past. It's a risk. But the response has been incredible. Like, the quality and the volume of responses just shows, like, I think tonally we've really done something different for fans. It's truly collaborative. It's built with them. It's built for them. So for us, it's like, it's opened our eyes on many, many different fronts, working with Tarek and iterating and trying and testing new things.
So, conscious of the fact that we have a very short minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes left here, I'm going to ask each of you to give me. Evan speaks constantly. Evan, who we're deeply thankful to have back, by the way, speaks constantly about business transformation. If we're not transforming businesses effectively, this didn't work. So, give me your hot take, one sentence, your hot take on something that on the future of business transformation as it relates to sports and blockchain. Nobody jump to go first.
Hot take.
One sentence, folks. Let's do it.
I think more. I think we're going to see an explosion in the number of regular consumers and sports fans that are on chain and have sovereignty over their assets and identity in some form or fashion. Whether that's a hot take or not, I'm not sure, but that's a belief.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I can go next, right? I would say in the next few years, continuity as well as, empowerment and belonging is going to become the norm that's there for fans, right? And anyone who's not on that journey is going to really, I would say, lose their relationship with their fans over time. Not as punchy, but I think the earlier part of it was
phenomenal. Tarek?
In my mind, the business transformation which I expect to see in sports as it pertains to blockchain is a stronger connection between who is creating the cultural capital and who is consuming it, right? Like, that to me is that tighter connection, that direct connection between the creators and the consumers of it. In sport, whether in music, in art, I think it's that disintermediation point, which is the biggest one. really we just have to figure out what kind of wrapping paper we want to wrap that thing in. Like that to me is the conundrum, is like what manifestation of the problem of solution is going to work best.
Thank you. So I just want to quickly thank everyone for tuning in and paying attention here and allowing us to wrap on this a little bit. I am deeply, deeply thankful and always aware of how blessed I am to work with the three of you gentlemen. It is a pleasure and an honor. And big ups to Zara, Nina, and Simone. Nina and Simone are two different people. That is not Nina Simone, but pretty equally cool. So yeah, thanks for putting this together. We will see you on the flip side, yo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone.